I've scored 1590 on the SAT with perfect 800s on back-to-back SAT math tests. And in this video, I show you 54 practical tips, tricks, and strategies for the digital SAT math section, each demonstrated on an actual question from Digital SAT Practice Test 4. For more digital SAT prep content, make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Here's how to interpret bar graphs on the SAT math section. Question 1 states a group of students voted on 5 after-school activities. The bar graph shows the number of students who voted for each of the 5 activities. How many students chose activity 3? In this case, we'll take a look at our y-axis. We see that that's number of students. Therefore, we want to know the number of students who voted for activity 3. We find that bar, and if we go ahead and go across, we see it's somewhere around 38 or 39, which we see is answer choice B. Here's how to answer this SAT math question about percentages in under 60 seconds. Question 2 states what percentage of 300 is 75? All you got to do is do 75 divided by 300, and then that will get you your decimal. To convert that to a percentage, you multiply it by 100, and that would get you 25%. So your answer is answer choice A. Here's how to solve this SAT math question in under 60 seconds. The question states, what is the solution to the given equation? In order to solve this, we need to isolate x. We'll start by multiplying both sides by 25. Next thing we have to do is get x all alone. So we have to take the square root of x squared, which means we also have to take the square root of 36 times 25. This leaves us with x is equal to the square root of 36 times 25, which will equal out to 30. So we know our answer there is going to be answer choice B. Here's how to efficiently solve this SAT math question. The question states 3 more than 8 times a number x is equal to 83. Which equation represents this situation? So one thing you'll note is as I read the question, I started writing down the equation. I noticed we have 3 more. That means 3 plus something, 8 times a number, which is represented as x. So plus 8x is equal to 83. Whereas for the equation, we've already got it. So 3 plus 8x equals 83. We see that we have that in answer choice D, so D will be our correct answer there. Here's how to interpret this word problem on the SAT. Question 5 states Hannah deposited a fixed amount into her bank account each month. The function f of t equals 100 plus 25t gives the amount in dollars in Hannah's bank account after t monthly deposits. What is the best interpretation of 25 in this context? Well, we know f of t represents the amount in her bank account. This 100, since it doesn't have any variables next to it, is her initial amount, and then she's adding on $25 every month. So that 25 is the amount that she's depositing every month. So we have option A, with each monthly deposit, the amount in Hannah's bank account increases by $25. Yes, that is the correct interpretation. So our answer is A. Here's how to quickly solve this SAT math question and a trick to check your work. Question 6 states a customer spent $27 to purchase oranges at $3 per pound. How many pounds of oranges did the customer purchase? Well, we know that she spent $27. So that's $27. Now we have to divide that by that $3 per pound. Okay, so that's $3 per pound. I'll represent pound as LB. Okay, now what we see here is that our dollars are going to cancel, and what we're left with is 27 over 3, which is 9 pounds. Okay, so we have 9 pounds. And obviously, you're seeing that this is the correct sort of equation to set up because we end with pounds. We want to know how many pounds of oranges the customer purchased. So that's one way you can check it, is by making sure you end with the correct units. And as you can see, our answer there will be 9. Here's a tip to help you be more efficient on the SAT math section and how to apply it. So when you glance at question 7, you see it's going to be more than 3 lines. Now, because it's more than 3 lines, I'm probably going to be dealing with some sort of equation or system of equations or system of inequalities. So what I'm going to do is, as I read through it, I'm going to start writing down coefficients and variables so that I can kind of get my equation on my initial read through, hopefully, which should save me time. So let's go ahead and read through. Let's hear about 9 storage bins that were each the same price. He used a coupon for $63 off the entire purchase. The cost for the entire purchase after using the coupon was $27. Okay, and we know that he got $63 off, and it's 9 times some variable. We'll see if we get what that is. What was the original price in dollars for one storage bin? We're not given it, so we'll just call that X. Okay, so now we have to solve for X. X is the cost per storage bin. So all we got to do here is isolate X. We'll add 63 to both sides. Okay, we're going to end up with 90 is equal to 9X. We divide both sides by 9, and that will give us X is equal to 10. So our answer there will be 10. So as you can see, by writing down our coefficients and variables on our initial read through, we're able to save time because we don't have to go back and find these coefficients and variables. We're able to get that equation set up immediately after our first read through, avoiding a second read through and saving us time. Here's how to turn a table into a linear function on the SAT. Question 8 states for the linear function f, the table shows 3 values of x and their corresponding values of f of x. Which equation defines f of x? In this case, all my answer choices are in slope-intercept form. So what I'll start by doing is finding the intercept. In this case, since I'm given the x coordinate of 0, I know that my y-intercept will be at 29, which means I can get rid of b and I can get rid of d. Next thing I'm looking at is slope. Okay, I see that when I go over 1, I go up by 3, which means my slope is going to be 3x. So my answer there will be answer choice A. Here's how to quickly solve this SAT math question about similar triangles. Question 9 states right triangle PQR and STU are similar where P corresponds to S. If the measure of angle Q is 18 degrees, what is the measure of angle S? Okay, so we know Q is 18 degrees. Okay, we also know then that T is going to be 18 degrees since these are similar triangles. Okay, now we want to solve for the measure of angle S. The measure of angle S is the same as the angle measure of P. So what we can do here, since this is a right triangle, okay, we know that 90 is going to equal our angle measure S, so S, plus our angle measure that is 18 degrees. So that would be angle measure T. Okay, so plus 18 degrees. 90 degrees equals S plus 18 degrees. That means that S is going to equal 90 minus 18. 90 minus 18 will leave us with 72 degrees. So 72 degrees will be our answer for the value of angle S. So our answer is B. Here's how to answer this question about scatter plots on the SAT. Question 10 states a scatter plot shows a relationship between two variables, X and Y. Which of the following equations is the most appropriate linear model for the data shown? In this case, since we're looking for a linear model, I'm going to go ahead and find about where the y-intercept is. It's right around 10. I see my slope is going to be negative. So if I'll go down to my answer choices, anything with a positive slope I can get rid of. So that means answer choices A I can get rid of, and answer choice C I can get rid of because they both have positive slopes. Then I'm looking at my y-intercept. My y-intercept needs to be right around positive 10, which I see I have in answer choice D. So D, we have that positive y-intercept somewhere around 10. Then we also have that negative slope of around 1. So D will be our correct answer there. Here's how to quickly solve this SAT math question. Question 11 states the given equation describes the relationship between the number of birds B and the number of reptiles R that can be cared for at a pet care business on a given day. If the business cares for 16 reptiles on a given day, how many birds can it care for on this day? Well, we know we can plug in 16 for R then. If we plug in 16 for R, we're going to end up with 5 times 16, which will equal 80. So then we would have 80 is equal to 80, okay, which means that the value of B has to be 0. Okay, so our answer is A. Here's a trick to help you move faster on the SAT math section. If we take a look at question 12, it asks, what is an equation of the graph shown? If I glance at my answer choices, I see all my y-intercepts are the same, so I'm really worried about my slope here. I see my slope is negative, which means I can get rid of anything with a positive slope. The next thing I see is I've got to calculate the negative slope and see what it is. Well, I see that right here. I go down by 2, and I go over by 2. Now, the key thing that they're testing you on is whether or not you're taking a look at what the units are, okay? Because if you look here, even though we only have one dash that we are changing, we are actually moving over to the right by 2 units. So the key thing here is to make sure that you're paying attention to what your units are on your x-axis and your y-axis. So as we can see, we are going down by 2 and we are going to the right by 2, which means that our actual slope here is just negative x. Okay, so our answer there is C. Here's how to answer this SAT math question super quickly. Question 13 states if x over 8 is equal to 5, what is the value of 8 over x? Since we know that x over 8 and 8 over x are just flipped, all we got to do is take this 5 over 1, flip it to 1 over 5, and that'll be our answer. Here's a trick to help you be way more efficient on the SAT math section. Question 14 states the solution to the given system of equations is x, y. What is the value of y? The key thing to pay attention to on questions like this is what you're asked to answer with. In this case, it's the value of y, which means there's a chance we don't have to calculate the value of x. If we take a look at this system of equations, whenever you see stacked equations like this, you want to look to add or subtract this bottom equation from the top one. And sometimes that might mean that you have to multiply the bottom or the top equation by some number in order to get to the value you want to answer with, which in this case is y. So to get y, we want to get rid of x. So let's take a look at if we can do that. Well, if we multiply this bottom equation by 4, we're going to end up with 24x. And then we can go ahead and subtract this bottom equation from the top equation. And then we'll be left with a y value and then a constant. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to have 24x minus 4 times 6x, so minus 24x. Our x's are then gone. Then we have y minus 4y because we have to distribute this 4. So y minus 4y is going to leave us with negative 3y is equal to 48 minus 4 times 72, which when we put in our calculator will give us negative 240. So from there, we isolate y by dividing both sides by negative 3. So we can go ahead and divide both sides by negative 3. And that's going to leave us with positive 80 as the value of y. So our answer there is 80. Here's a trick to solve this SAT math question way faster. Question 15 states a line t in the xy plane has a slope of negative 1/3 and passes through the point 9, 10. Which equation defines line t? First thing I'm seeing is I've got this slope of negative 1/3, which means I can get rid of answer choices A and B, and I'm left with C and D, the only difference with the two being their y-intercepts. Now, since I know that this is ultimately going down and I've got these points 9 and 10, if I plot that point just roughly, I know my y-intercept is going to have to be somewhere above 10, right? Because we got to be going down throughout this time. So because we have these points, that's why we know that. Thus, our answer cannot be C because C would require us to have a flat line in order to hit that point. So we know that that cannot be true, and we know our answer there has to be answer choice D. Here's how to interpret exponential growth word problems on the SAT math section. Question 16 states the function f of x is equal to 206 times 1.034 raised to the power of x models the value in dollars of a certain bank account by the end of each year from 1957 through 1972, where x is the number of years after 1957. Which of the following is the best interpretation of f of 5 is approximately equal to 243 in this context? Well, we know that 243 is ultimately what the value of f of 5 is. Therefore, that 243 is the amount that is in the account after 5 years after 1957. So that would put us at 1962. Okay, so let's go ahead and find the answer choice that matches up with that interpretation. We have option A, the value of the bank account is estimated to be approximately $5 greater in 1962 than in 1957. No. B, the value of the bank account is estimated to be approximately $243 in 1962. Yes, 1962 is 5 years after, thus the F of 5, and it's equal to that $243 in value. Here's how to quickly answer this SAT math question using proportions. Question 17 states, for a certain rectangular region, the ratio of its length to its width is 35 to 10. If the width of the rectangular region increases by 7 units, how must the length change to maintain this ratio? Okay, so what we know here is that our length is going to equal 3.5 times our width. And the way we get that is by having 35 over 10, right? If you were to rewrite 35 over 10, you get 3.5. All right, so now from here, we want to know if we increase our width by 7 units, how much will our length change? Well, we can just use this proportion right here. So all we would have then is 3.5 times 7, which will equal 24.5. So we know that we must increase by 24.5. Since we are increasing our width, we must also increase our length in order to maintain that ratio or proportion. So our answer there is B. Here's how to break down hard SAT math problems to make them easy and simplistic. Question 18 states square P has a side length of X inches. Square Q has a perimeter that is 176 inches greater than the perimeter of square P. The function f gives the area of square Q in square inches. Which of the following defines f? Okay, well, we know that ultimately the perimeter of square Q is going to be 4x plus 176. All right, that is equal to the perimeter of square Q. Okay, now the key thing here is we need to understand what we have to solve for, and that's the area of square Q. So in order to find the area of a square, we need to know the side length. So in order to find the side length here, what we can do is we can take this perimeter and we can divide it all by 4. So if we go ahead and take 4x plus 176, and we divide all of that by 4, that's going to leave us with x plus 44 as the value of the side length. Now, the area of the square then is going to be the value of the side length squared. So we know our answer there will be answer choice A. Here's how to quickly rearrange variables on the SAT. Question 19 states a given equation relates the distinct positive real numbers w, x, and y. Which equation correctly expresses w in terms of x and y? Well, in this case, all we got to do then is isolate w, as you can see in all our answer choices. So what we'll do here is we'll go ahead and divide both sides by 2. When we divide this side by 2, we see we have 2 times 7, which is going to equal 14. So we can go ahead and cancel both these 14s. Now we're left with x over y is equal to the square root of w plus 19. So we're going to go ahead and square this side so we can get that w out from underneath that square root. And since we're squaring that side, we also have to square this side. So what we're going to end up with then is going to be x over y squared is equal to w plus 19. To isolate w, we got to subtract 19 from both sides. So we're going to end up with w is equal to x over y, and that's all going to be squared minus 19. If we look at our answer choices, we see that that's going to be answer choice C. So C will be our answer for question 19. Here's something really simple about circles that you need to know for the SAT. Question 20 states point O is the center of a circle. The measure of arc RS on the circle is 100 degrees. What is the measure in degrees of its associated angle RS? Now, what you need to know here is that if you have an arc, for example, RS, and you have its associated angle, that associated angle is going to be the same degrees as the arc. So the answer here is just 100. And if you want to see this sort of drawn out, I'll do that really quick. Okay, we have center O, and we're drawing R, O, S. So R to O to S. Okay, we're told that the arc RS is 100 degrees. Well, that means that the angle also has to be 100 degrees. Here's how to quickly solve this difficult SAT math question. Question 21 states the expression, and then I'm not going to say that, but you can read it, is equivalent to ax to the power b, where a and b are positive constants. X is greater than 1. What is the value of a plus b? Pay really close attention to here. This is free response. It'd be very easy for someone to answer with the value of a or b, or a times b. We need to answer with a plus b. Okay, that being said, let's go ahead and solve. So what I see here is that I'm taking the 5th root and then the 8th root. So I've got a 6, and then we've got 5th root of 3 raised to the power 5, which would leave us with just 3, since that's 5 over 5, which is to the power of 1. Okay, so I'll just write that as power to 1, so you understand that. Next thing we have is x to the 45 over 5. Okay, so x to the 45 over 5 is the same as x to the power of 9. Okay, so we have x to the power of 9. Now we have to multiply that by this root 8 and then 2 to the power of 8, which is the same as 2 to the power of 8 over 8, or 2 to the power of 1. And then we have to multiply that by x to the power of 1 over 8. All right, so from here, it's pretty simple. We're going to take this 6 times 3 times 2, and 6 times 3 gives us 18. 18 times 2 gives us 36. Now we have 36. Okay, so now we have 36. Now the next thing we've got is this x to the power of 9 times x to the power of 1/8. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and convert this 9 into something where the denominator is 8 as well. So I'll do 9 times 8, and that's going to give us 72. So we'll have x to the power of 72 over 8. And now I can go ahead and add 72 and 1 to get me x to the power of 73 over 8. Okay, now we know that our value for A is going to be 36. Okay, so A will equal 36. And we know that our value for B is going to equal 73 over 8. So from here, what we have to do is we have to sum these two values together. Now, in order to sum these together, I need to convert this 36 into also being over 8. So I'll go ahead and convert that. So that's going to be 36 times 8, which will give us 288 over 8. So now we have 288 plus 73. 288 plus 73 is going to leave us with 361 all over 8. So our answer there is 361 divided by 8. Here's how to answer this difficult question about calculating the area of a triangle on the SAT. Question 22 states a right triangle has side lengths of 2 root 2, 6 root 2, and root 80. What is the area of the triangle in square units? Key thing we have to figure out here is what is the hypotenuse out of these three lengths, because we know the formula for the area of a triangle is equal to 1/2 the base times the height. So what I notice here is that I've got 2 root 2, 6 root 2. So this is obviously the greater. So we know one of our legs will be that 2 root 2. Now between 6 root 2 and root 80, what I know is if I take 6 and I square it, I get 36. Okay, so what I could do is I could rewrite 6 root 2 is equal to root 72. And I get root 72 because I take 6 squared, that gets me 36, and then I multiply that by that 2. Okay, so I know that ultimately this root 80 is what will be the hypotenuse. So therefore, I know that my base and my height values can be represented then as that 2 root 2 and then that 6 root 2. Okay, from here, it's really easy because we see this 2 is going to cancel with this 2, and we're going to be left with A is equal to 6 times root 2, which we know will end up equaling 6 times 2, which will equal 12. Okay, so our answer there would be answer choice B. Here's how to solve one of the most difficult questions on the SAT math section. And even though I think this question is kind of pointless and stupid, I'll still show you how to solve it. Question 23 states the expression 4x squared plus bx minus 45, where b is a constant, can be rewritten as hx plus k times x plus j, where h, k, and j are integer constants. Now, if you ever come across on the SAT them saying that something is integer constants, that probably means it's going to be required in order for you to solve the problem, so pay close attention to it. Which of the following must be an integer? So once again, if they're telling you that something needs to be an integer, pay attention to that always. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by expanding this right here, this hx plus k times x plus j. I'm going to expand it out because as you can see, we're going to need to end up getting the values for, h, k, possibly j as well in order to get our answer. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to end up with 4x squared plus bx minus 45 is going to equal, and now we'll go ahead and expand on this. So we'll have hx squared, and then we'll have plus kx, and then we'll also end up with a plus jhx as well. So we're going to have plus jhx plus kx, and then we'll have a plus kj as well from this k times j. Okay, so from here, let's go ahead and try to simplify this right side. So we'll still have hx squared, but I see I have this common factor of x, so I'm going to go ahead and pull that out. So we'll end up with plus x times jh plus k, and then plus kj. All right, from here, let's start getting what things equal. We see that we're going to have a negative 45 is equal to the value of k times j. The other thing that we see is that we have this bx, not necessarily anything we can really do with that at this point. We know that 4 is going to equal the value of h, since we have 4x squared and hx squared. So we also know that 4 would equal the value of h. From here, this is the point where it really becomes important to pay attention to the fact that h, k, and j have to be integers. Because they have to be integers, I can then state that k must equal negative 45 over j. If we see this, that negative 45 over j, then we know that that's an integer. If we also see that j is equal to negative 45 over k, we know that that would have to be an integer as well. And then obviously if we see, the value of just h. So let's go ahead and run through these. We have option A, b over h. Obviously we don't have the value of b, so that's not going to be our answer. At least, not at this point. B over k. Once again, I'm not really looking for the value of b. Down here, 45 over h. We know h is 4. 45 over 4 isn't an integer. It is a decimal, but it's not an integer. And then we have c, 45 over k, which we know would actually have to be our correct answer here. And I'll go ahead and explain why, right? Like I said, we have j is equal to negative 45 over k. We know that j is an integer. Just because there's a negative doesn't mean that it's not an integer, right? So our answer there would have to be answer choice D, because this ultimately has to be negative, and then 45 over k has to be an integer. Keep in mind that if we have negative 3, for example, that's an integer as well. So our answer there would be D, and that's how you solve this really difficult SAT math problem. Here's how to efficiently solve this difficult SAT math problem. Question 24 states, in the given system of equations, A is a constant. The graph of the equations in the given system intersect at exactly 1 point. Anytime you're told that a system intersects at exactly 1 point or exactly 2 points, or that it never intersects, pay close attention to that. In the XY plane, what is the value of X? Always pay close attention to what you're asked to answer with as well. In this case, it is the value of X. Okay, so that means we might not actually have to solve for A. Okay, we just need to solve for the value of X. All right, so immediately what jumps out to me is I have Y equals and Y equals. So I'm gonna go ahead and substitute this 3X plus A over here for Y. And then I'm going to work to set it all equal to 0. And the reason why I want to set it all equal to 0 is because I want to end up using b squared minus 4ac is equal to 0. Because if this value is equal to 0, then that means that we have one real solution, or in other words, we intersect at exactly 1 point. So that's ultimately what I'm trying to get in terms of the form. So I want to set it equal to 0. To do that, I'm going to have 2x squared, and then I have this minus 21x, but I also have to subtract 3x from both sides. So once I do that, that's going to end up leaving me with negative 24x, and then I have plus 64, but I also have to subtract a from both sides. So that's going to give me plus 64 minus a. Now what I'm going to do here is I just want to deal with the c value. I don't actually want to deal with 64 minus a. So I'm just going to go plus c, and then I'll state up here that c is equal to 64 minus a. All right, from here, we know that our b value is negative 24, so we'll have negative 24 squared minus 4 times our a value, which is 2 times c. And we know that that's all has to equal 0 for there to only be one real solution. Now, negative 24 squared is going to give us 576 when we put it in our calculator. So we have 576 minus 8c is equal to 0. We can rewrite this as 576 is equal to 8c by adding 8c to both sides, which therefore means that c is going to have to equal that 576 divided by 8, which is going to equal a value of 72. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and erase the value of c here, and I'm going to put in 72. We'll put in that it equals 0 as well, and then I'm going to erase everything down here. Okay, so from here, we're going to look to factor out what we can and solve for the value of x. So I see that 2 is a common factor in all of these, so I'll factor out a 2. I'll be left with x squared minus 12x plus 36 is equal to 0. From there, I'm looking for numbers that multiply to get 36 that will have a sum of negative 12. So from there, I'm looking at 6 as the value for that. So that would be x minus 6 times x minus 6. Okay, now we factor this out. We see that x will have to equal 6. So our value for the value of x then would be 6. So our answer there would be C. Here's something you need to know about isosceles right triangles for the SAT. Question 25 states an isosceles right triangle has a hypotenuse of length 58 inches. What is the perimeter in inches of this triangle? All right, so let's go ahead and write this out. Anytime you're given a triangle or a circle questions on the SAT, it's usually helpful to write it out. So we're given our hypotenuse. Now, keep in mind that since this is an isosceles right triangle, we know that it's a 45, 45, 90 triangle, which has this special property where the side length x will be the same side length since isosceles, and then the value of the hypotenuse would be x times the square root of 2. Now, this is important because when we have our given hypotenuse of 58 inches, I would elect to rewrite this actually as, and I'll just write that this is equal to 29 times root 2 times root 2. And you'll see why I'm writing that in a second here. So times root 2 times root 2. Now, the reason I'm choosing to write it like that is because then we know that our values down here would be 29 times root 2, since they just don't have that extra root 2 added onto them. And that, since they're isosceles, they're going to be the same. Now, from here, we want to find the perimeter. So the perimeter is pretty easy to do. We're just going to add in all these side lengths. We'd have 29 times root 2, and we'd actually multiply that by 2 since we'd be adding it to itself. So that's the same as multiplying by 2, which is ultimately, I'll go over what that'll equal out to in a second, but we also have to add on to that then our value of hypotenuse, which we know is 58. Okay, so from here, we have 29 root 2 times 2. That's going to end up leaving us with 58 root 2 plus 58 as a value of our perimeter, which we see is going to be equal to answer choice C. So C will be our correct answer there. Here's how to solve one of the most difficult questions on the SAT. Question 26 states in the XY plane, a parabola with vertex 9 and negative 14 intersects the x-axis at 2 points. If the equation of the parabola is written in the form y equals ax squared plus bx plus c, where a, b, and c are constants, which of the following could be the value of a plus b plus c? Now keep in mind, we always want to pay attention to what we're asked to answer with. In this case, that is the value of a plus b plus c. So we need to know the value of all three values. So first thing we know is our vertex. So if we're given our vertex on a parabola question like this, we're probably looking to use vertex form. Now vertex form would be y is equal to a times x minus h squared plus k, where our vertex is hk. All right, well, we know our vertex, so let's go ahead and substitute in. So we're gonna have y is equal to a x minus 9 squared minus 14. Okay, from here, we wanna get these values a, b, and c, which means we need to get into the form of ax squared plus bx plus c. So to do that, let's go ahead and expand this x minus 9 squared. So we're going to get y is equal to a times x squared minus 18x, and then we would have plus 81 minus 14, or that'd be plus 81, plus 81 minus 14. All right, so now from here, we need to distribute this a. So we got to distribute the a to the x squared, to that negative 18x, and to that plus 81. So I'm going to go ahead and erase what we have here. So we're going to have y is equal to ax squared minus 18 ax plus 81a minus 14. All right, so now from here, what I'm gonna look to do is get the values of a, b, and c. So let's start with a. So we know that a is going to equal just a. It is what it is. Now b is going to equal this value of negative 18ax, or negative 18a, since that x is included right here. So negative 18a. Our c value is going to equal 81a minus 14, so minus 14. All right, so from here, I want to sum these all together. So a plus b plus c is going to equal a minus a plus 81a minus 14. Now from here, what we're going to look to do is go ahead and combine these a terms. So what we'll have then is a minus 18a, which will give us negative 17a. Negative 17a plus 81a will give us positive 64a. So we'll have 64a minus 14. Now, what I'm immediately noticing and that I want to look at is we have to keep in mind that this intersects the x-axis at 2 points. Now, because we're intersecting the x-axis at 2 points, but we know our vertex has a y-coordinate that's below that x-axis, we know that we must open up. So our parabola must look like this, like a smiley face. We must open up to cross that x-axis. Well, that means that the a value must be positive. So if our a value must be positive, then we're going to have 64 times some positive number. Let's just pick 0.001 just as an example here. Okay, and then we have to subtract 14 from it. So we know that we can't ever get below negative 4, we can't even reach negative 14, right? Because this is going to be some positive number and we're subtracting that negative 14. So we can't get to negative 14, we can't get to negative 19, and we can't get to negative 23. Okay, we would have to have that value be negative 12. That's the only possible value. So our answer has to be D. Here's something you need to watch out for on the SAT. Question 27 states function f is defined by f of x equals negative a to the power of x plus b, where a and b are constants. In the xy plane, the graph of y equals f of x minus 15 has a y-intercept of 0 and negative 99 over 7, where the product of a and b is 65 over 7. What is the value of a? So a couple things you need to look out for here. Number one, what are you asked to answer with? In this case, it's the value of a, so that's the only thing we should really focus on solving, unless there's something we need to solve before in order to get to the value of a. Next thing, we are given that the product of a and b is 65 over 7. So let's go ahead and write that. A times b is equal to 65 over 7. Now, the main thing you need to watch out for in order to avoid getting stuck on this question or getting it wrong is the fact that we have y is equal to f of x minus 15. If you ever have a transformation like this on the SAT, you really need to pay attention to it, because if you don't, you're probably going to end up getting it wrong. So in this case, we have f of x is equal to negative a to the power of x plus b. Well, we know that y then must equal a negative a to the power of x plus b minus 15. Okay, and that's a really important distinction. Now that we have the value of y, let's go ahead and substitute in our points. So we have this point of x being 0, so that would equal then negative a to the power of 0 plus b minus 15 is going to equal that value of negative 99 over 7. So we have negative 99 over 7. Now from here, what we're going to look to do is solve for the value of b, and then we can use b in order to get the value of a using this equation up here. So to solve for b, we can go ahead and write this, and I'll try to write it out a little bit bigger up top. So as you can see, we had a to the power of 0, and any number to the power of 0 is 1. So that leaves us with this negative 1 plus b minus 15. Now from here, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and add 1, or add 7 over 7 to both sides. Now once I add 7 over 7 to both sides, I'm left with negative 92 over 7 is equal to b minus 15. I'll do the same thing with that 15. So I'll add 15 times 7 over 7 to both sides. If I put my calculator here, 15 times 7, that's going to give me 105. Okay, so if I add 105 over 7 to both sides, that's going to end up leaving me with b is equal to 13 over 7. All right, so now that I have my value of B, I can go back and I can solve for the value of A. Now, how can we do that? Well, if we go ahead and divide both sides by B here, we would get A is equal to 65 over 7 times B. Okay, well, we know that the value of B is 13 over 7. So if we go ahead and plug that in for the value of B, 13 over 7, we see that these 7s are going to cancel, and we're going to be left with 65 divided by 13, which is going to equal 5. So our answer for the value of A, which we're asked to answer with, always check that, is 5. Here's how to quickly interpret this line graph. Question 1 states the line graph shows the estimated number of chipmunks in a state park on April 1 of each year from 1989 to 1999. In our y-axis, we see we have the estimated number of chipmunks. X-axis, we have year. Based on the line graph, in which year was the estimated number of chipmunks in the state park the greatest? Well, we see that the greatest or maximum point is right here, which we see is going to be in the year 1994, so our answer there is B. Here's a tip for unit conversion questions on the SAT. Question 2 states a fish swam a distance of 5,104 yards. How far did the fish swim in miles? What you're going to do is you're going to take your number of yards, 5,104, and we'll use Y to represent yards here. And we want to multiply in a way that gets rid of the yards. We want our yards on the bottom. So we want that 1760 yards per 1 mile with yards on the bottom. Now, as you can see, our yards will cancel and we'll be left with our distance in miles, which when we put this into our calculator will give us 2.9 miles. And as you can see, our only unit that is left is miles. Here's how to solve this SAT math question in under 60 seconds. Question 3 states, which expression is equivalent to 12x cubed minus 5x cubed? Key thing here is since you have x cubed and x cubed, you just do that 12 minus 5. That's going to leave you with 7x cubed, and your answer there is going to be C. Here's a tip for the SAT math section. Question 4 states, what is the solution xy to the given system of equations? If you see that you have 5y equals x, you can go ahead and take this x and you can substitute in that 5y. This will help you solve y, and then afterwards you can solve x. So let's go ahead and do that. 5y plus y will give us 6y is equal to 18. From there, we divide both sides by 6, and we'll see that y is equal to 3. Now, at this point, we have to go ahead and we can actually just take a look at our answer choices and see that our answer has to be A. And the reason our answer has to be A is that's the only answer choice with 3 as our y value. So as you can see, you don't always have to solve for both x and y. Sometimes you can solve for just one of the variables. Here's how to quickly solve this SAT math question. Question 5 states the point 8, 2 in the xy plane is a solution of which of the following systems inequalities? Well, we have our x point of 8 and our y point of 2. So let's go ahead and check. Well, if we plug in 8 for x, we have 8 is greater than 0. That's true. Now, is 2 greater than 0? That's also true. So our answer has to be A. Here's something you need to know about absolute value for the SAT math section. If you take a look at question 6, it says, what is one possible solution to the given equation? Well, here we have the absolute value of x minus 5 is equal to 10. So the way that we're going to set this up is first by doing x minus 5 is equal to 10. When we do that, we see if we add 5 to both sides, we'll get x is equal to 15. So one of the possible answers here is 15, but there is another possible answer. When you have absolute value like you do here, another way, or your other answer here would be negative x minus 5 is equal to 10. From there, you distribute that negative sign to your x and also to your minus 5. That's going to end up giving you negative x plus 5 is equal to 10. You would subtract 5 from both sides, and you would get negative x is equal to 5. And then from there, you would get that x is equal to negative 5. So negative 5 could be the other answer to this question. Here's how to efficiently solve this SAT math question. Question 7 states the function gives the total number of people on a company retreat with X managers. What is the total number of people on a company retreat with 7 managers? Well, in this case, we just plug in 7 for X. So we would have f of 7 is going to equal 7 times 7 plus 1. 7 times 7 is 49. 49 plus 1 is 50. So our answer there is 50. Here's how to quickly solve this SAT math question by plugging and chugging. Question 8 states which table gives 3 values of x and their corresponding values of h of x for the given function. All right, so the first thing I'm going to notice is that all of these have these x's of 1, 2, and 3, so it's going to be pretty easy to solve this. I'll start by plugging in 1 for x. If I put in 1 for x, I have 1 squared minus 3. I know 1 squared minus 3 is going to give me a value of negative 2. Therefore, I can get rid of a. B is still a possible answer because that is true. C I can get rid of, and then D is also a possible answer because that's true. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to jump to 3 just because I know it's really easy. 3 squared minus 3, well, 3 squared is 9, 9 minus 3 would be 6. So I see that I have 3 and 6, which is true. If I look here, 3 and 3 isn't true, and 3 and 3 isn't true. My answer there has got to be answer choice B. And the reason, just to point this out really quickly, the reason I chose 3 is because I saw that 2 and 1 here are both the same. Okay, because 2 and 1 were the same, and B and D, and those were the two that I had it narrowed down to, there was no point in checking them. I went ahead and moved on to using the x value of 3. Here's something you need to know about when the exponent is 0 for the SAT. Question 9 states the function f is defined by f of x is equal to 270 times 0.1 to the power of x. What is the value of f of 0? Well, if we plug in 0 for x, we have 0.1 raised to the power of 0. Now, 0.1 raised to the power of 0 is like any number raised to the power of 0. It's going to equal 1. Therefore, you're going to end up with 270 times 1, which is just going to equal 270, and your answer will be answer choice D. Here's something you need to know about margin of error for the SAT. Question 10 states to estimate the proportion of a population that has a certain characteristic, a random sample was selected from the population. Based on the sample, it is estimated the proportion of the population that has the characteristic is 0.49, with an estimated margin of error of 0.04. Based on the estimate and the margin of error, which of the following is the most appropriate conclusion about the proportion of the population that has the characteristics? A couple things I want to point out here. Number one, we are taking a random sample. It's very important we take a random sample because if we don't, we can't apply it to the general population. It has to be a random sample. In this case, it is, so that's perfect. Now, the next thing we need to note is that the estimated proportion of the population that has a characteristic is 0.9 with an associated margin of error of 0.04. So what that means is answer choice A. It's plausible that the proportion is between 0.49 and 0.53. And you get that by adding 0.04 to 0.49 and subtracting 0.04 to 0.49. So our answer there has to be answer choice A. Here's a tip to help you move faster on the SAT. If you encounter a word problem, you see it's more than 3 lines, try to write out the equation or system of equations or system of inequalities that comes up in the question as you read it on your first read through. That way you don't have to do a second read through when you're done reading the question. So let's go ahead and show an example. A moving truck can tow a trailer if the combined weight of the trailer and boxes is no more than 4,600 pounds. Well, that means that 4,600 pounds must be greater than or equal to the combined weight of the trailer and the boxes. Now, what is the maximum number of boxes this truck can tow in a trailer with a weight of 500 pounds if each box weighs 120 pounds? So we'll use B for the number of boxes. Okay, now we have to keep in mind here that we just got to solve for B. So we'll just subtract 500 from both sides. That's going to end up leaving us with 4,100 must be greater than or equal to 120B. We'll divide both sides by divide both sides by 120. Okay, 4,100 divided by 120. We can put that in our calculator. When you put that in your calculator, you're going to get 34 repeating. Okay, now keep in mind that B has to be less than that, so the maximum number of boxes would be 34. So our answer is A. This SAT math question is a great example of when it can be a great idea to use Desmos on the digital SAT. Question 12 states, what is the positive solution to the given equation? Well, what I would do here is I would take this and set it equal to 0. So I'd have negative 4x squared minus 7x plus 36 is equal to 0. Now from here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and put it in Desmos, and then I'm going to solve for what the positive solution is by looking at where it equals zeros, or in other words, where it crosses the x-axis. Now keep in mind, we need the positive solution. So the positive solution here we see is 2.25, or in other words, 9 over 4. So our answer there is going to be answer choice B. Here's how to quickly answer this probability question on the SAT. Question 13 states the table summarizes the distribution of color and shape for 100 tiles of equal area. If one of these tiles is selected at random, that's a key component here, what is the probability of selecting a red tile? Express your answer as a decimal or fraction, not as a percent. All right, so ultimately here we are selecting a red tile. We see the total number of red tiles is 30, and this is out of a total of 100, so that'd be 30 over 100, which will calculate out as a decimal of 0.3, so our answer there is 0.3. Here's something you need to know about parallel lines for the SAT math section. Question 14 states, for the given function f, the graph of y equals f of x in the xy plane is parallel to line j. What is the slope of line j? Well, since they're parallel, they have to have the same slope, which means that line j must have a slope of 2. Here's how to quickly solve this SAT math question that deals with proportions and differences. Question 15 states a proposal for a new library was included on an election ballot. A radio show stated that 3 times as many people voted in favor of the proposal as people who voted against it. So we have 3 times the number that voted against it, which I'll represent as an A, is equal to the number who voted in favor of it. A social media post reported that 15,000 more people voted in favor of the bill or of the proposal than voted against it. Okay, so we also know that the number of people who voted in favor is equal to the number who voted against it plus 15,000. Based on these data, how many people voted against the proposal? So in this case, we want to solve for A. Well, we already have what F is equal to, so we can go and substitute in. So we would have F is equal to A plus 15,000, so A plus 15,000. From here, I'll go ahead and isolate A by dividing both sides by 3. So I'll have A is equal to A over 3 plus 15,000 over 3, which would simplify down to 5,000. From there, I'll go ahead and subtract A over 3 from both sides. A minus, I'll just write this out, A minus A over 3 is going to equal out to 2A, so 2/3 times A, which is equal to 5,000 still. Next thing we'll do is we'll multiply both sides by 3 over 2. So we'll multiply both sides by 3 over 2. Okay, keep in mind that 5,000 times 3 over 2 will give us 7,500. So we'll have 7,500 then is equal to A. So our answer there is answer choice A. Here's something you need to know about intersecting parallel lines on the SAT. Question 16 states in the figure lines M and N are parallel. If X equals 6K plus 13 and Y equals 8K minus 29, what is the value of Z? So always pay attention to what you're asked to answer with. In this case, that is the value of Z. Well, to calculate the value of Z, we need to know what this angle right here is. Now we know that that angle has to be the same as the value of angle Y and the value of angle X. So we can go ahead and just put Y as the angle measure there as well. So what we ultimately need to do is we need to get 180, which is the value of this semi-arc, right? And we'll take that, or that angle measure, right? 180. We have to then subtract angle Y, and that'll give us angle Z. So we need to solve for angle Y first. Well, in order to solve for angle Y, we know that X and Y are equal to each other. So we'll set these two together and we'll solve for K, and that'll give us the value of angle Y. So we have 6K plus 13 is equal to 8K minus 29. Now from here, I'll go ahead and subtract 6K from both sides. Once we do that, we'll be left with 2K. On our right side, we'll go ahead and add 29 to both sides so we can start isolating K even further. That's going to leave us with 42 is equal to 2K. We'll divide both sides by 2, and we'll get that K is equal to 21. So K would equal 21. From there, we can go ahead and solve for the value of Y. All right, so we have K is equal to 21. So we have then the value of, we'll solve for X just because it looks like it's a bit easier. So we'd have the value of X is going to equal 6 times 21 plus 13. Okay, 6 times 21 is going to give us 126. 126 plus 13 is going to give us 139. Then we have to do 180 minus 139 to get the value of Z, and that's going to leave us with 41. So our answer there is C. Here's a trick to help you on the SAT math section. Question 17 states in the given equation, P is a constant. The equation has no solution. What is the value of P? In this case, asked to answer with the value of P. Always pay attention to what you're asked to answer with, and pay attention to key information. For instance, the equation has no solution. Well, because it has no solution, we know it's set equal to a constant. We also know that we have X and a value that will ultimately be with X. So because of this, if there's any sort of number next to X, then we know that we're going to have at least one solution. So in order for there to be no solutions, we need to get this set equal to 0. So ultimately what we need then is negative 3x plus 21 px to equal 0. Well, in order for that to be the case, we can go ahead and add 3x to both sides. We'll get that 3x has to equal 21 times p times x. We see our x's will cancel, and we'll be left then with 3 is equal to 21p. In order to solve for p, we'll divide both sides by 21. We'll see that p is equal to 3 over 21, which we know is equal to 1 over 7, so our answer has to be B. Here's a trick you should know about quadratics for the SAT. Question 18 states the function f is defined by the given equation. For what value of x does f of x reach its minimum? Well, if you have a quadratic like this, your value of x at which f of x will reach its minimum or maximum will be the midpoint between the two x-intercepts. We see here our x-intercepts are going to be 10 and negative 13. And the way that we get those is by taking a look at x minus 10, setting that equal to 0, adding 10 to both sides. And then you see x equals 10. Same thing that you'll do for x plus 13. You subtract 13 from both sides when it's set equal to 0, and you get that x equals negative 13. Now, from here, we're going to take our two x-intercepts. We are going to sum them together, and then we'll divide by 2 to get the midpoint of them. And that'll be the value of x where f of x reaches its minimum. In this case, that's going to give us negative 3 over 2. So our answer will be D. Here's a tip that's extremely helpful for the SAT, and that is the vertex form of a quadratic. And I'm going to illustrate this with question 19. The question states the function f of x is equal to 1/9 x minus 7 squared plus 3 gives a metal ball's height above the ground f of x in inches x seconds after it started on a moving track, where x must be between 10 and 0, which are both inclusive. Which of the following is the best interpretation of the vertex of the graph y equals f of x in the xy plane? This question's way easier if you understand what this vertex form is. Well, vertex form at its simplest would be f of x is equal to a, which can be some coefficient, x minus h squared plus k, where your vertex is going to be h comma k. So as we can see in this case, our vertex would be at 7 for our x value. Okay, so I'll write 7. I'll just rewrite this. Okay, our vertex would be at 7 and 3. Okay, so that's going to be where our vertex is. So understand vertex form is going to help you a lot. Now, we have to keep in mind that 7 is not any sort of height. 7 is just the time, since it's that x value. Now, the actual height here is 3. Now, the other thing we need to understand is whether this is a function that is opening up or down, and you get that from the a value. Okay, and our a value is positive, which means that our graph is going to open up like a smiley face. Now, because that's the case, we know that that vertex will be a minimum. It'll be a minimum point or a minimum height. So if we look at our answer choice, we have option A. The metal ball's minimum height was 3 inches above the ground. We know that that'll be the correct answer because we ultimately have that minimum height at 7.3, 3 being the number of inches it is above the ground. Here's how to quickly solve this SAT math question about triangles. Question 20 states in triangle JKL, cosine of K is equal to 24 over 51 and angle J is a right angle. What is the value of the cosine of L? Well, with triangles and circles questions, I always recommend to go ahead and just draw them out because it is very helpful to visualize. Okay, in this case, we know that we have a right triangle. We also know that angle J is going to be the right angle, so we can go and put J here, and then we'll put KL. Now we're asked for the value of cosine of L. Okay, we know that the cosine is our adjacent over our hypotenuse. All right, so in order to calculate this, we need to know the values of the hypotenuse and the adjacent one. Now we also know that the value of the cosine of K is 24 over 51. Okay, well, if the cosine of K is 24 over 51, we know our hypotenuse is 51, and we know that the adjacent side length is 24. So from here, what we'll do is we'll do 51 squared minus 24 squared is equal to LJ, this line, squared. All right, now what we can do then is we'll just take the square root of all of this and the square root of LJ squared, and that'll just give us the value of the length LJ. Okay, so once we do that, if we put that in our calculator, that is going to give us a value of 45 for LJ. So we have 45 here now. Now we're asked for the value of cosine of L. So we can go ahead and have the adjacent, which is 45 over our hypotenuse of 51. So 45 over 51, which can be simplified down if we divide both sides by 3 to 15 over 17, or you could also put it in your calculator. And if you do that, you're going to get a value of 0.82. Okay, so answers are here and here. And you could also take the value of 0.8823, and that would be accepted as well by the SAT. Here's how to solve this SAT math question that deals with an equation that has no real solution. In question 21, it says in the given equation, b is a positive integer. The equation has no real solution. What is the greatest possible value of b? So a couple key things here. If you're told that an integer is positive or negative, always pay attention to it. Next thing, we know that we have no real solution. So we're asked for what the greatest possible value of b is. What you need to understand here is that for a quadratic to have no real solution, the value of b squared minus 4ac must be less than 0. So from here, let's go ahead and get the values of b, a, and c, and we'll plug them in. So we know that our value of b here is just b, okay? It's just what's in front of the x. So we have b squared then minus 4 times a. We know our a value is going to be negative 1, so I'll just change this to a plus 4, and then I have it multiplied by c. Our c value is negative 676. All right, from here we have 4 times negative 676, and that'll give us a value of 2,704. So we're going to have b squared then minus 2,704. Okay, we know that this has to be less than 0. So from here, I'll go ahead and add 2,704 to both sides, and I'll end up with b squared must be less than 2,704. At this point, we take the square root of both sides to isolate b. So once we do that, we're going to be left with b must be less than 52. Now, keep in mind, your answer for the greatest possible value of b is not 52 because we have to have a b value that is less than 52, and it has to be a positive integer. So the next highest positive integer that is less than 52 is 51. Okay, so the maximum possible value of b is 51. Here's how to solve this tricky SAT math question. Question 22 states if a new graph of 3 linear equations is created using the system of equations shown and the equation x plus 4y equals 16, how many solutions xy will the resulting system of 3 equations have? Well, let's start by going ahead and plotting this third equation. So we see we have x plus 4y equals negative 16. Now I'm going to go ahead and convert that into slope-intercept form so it's easier to graph. So what I'll do is I'll start by subtracting x from both sides. That'll give me 4y equals negative x minus 16. From there, I'll divide both sides by 4, and that's going to give me y is equal to negative x over 4, or in other words, negative 1/4 x. And then I have that much minus 16 over 4, which is equal to minus 4. So I'll go ahead and plot that on this graph. Okay, so I have this minus 4, and then I'm going up by about 1/4 per. So I'll just go ahead and go over 4, and then I go up by 1. All right, and if I go ahead and do that, I'll just kind of draw a rough line because we don't need it to be perfect. And as we can see, if we extend these lines, okay, here's where our crossings will be. Now, as you can see, there's not any single point where all 3 of these lines intersect. Now, there are points where 2 of the lines intersect, but there is no point where all 3 intersect at one time. So the answer here is 0. Many people would be tempted to pick something like 1 or maybe 2, but the correct answer is 0 because it's about where all 3 of these lines intersect at a single point, and that never happens. Here's something you need to know about the formula for exponential growth on the SAT. Question 23 states the function f gives the value in dollars of a certain piece of equipment after X months of use. If the value of the equipment decreases each year by P% of its value the previous year, what is the value of P? Now, keep in mind, we're talking about how much it decreases each year. Now, what you want to take a look at is your growth factor here. Now, your growth factor is 0.64, which means we are decreasing in value by 1 minus 0.64, which is 0.36, or in other words, 36%. So our answer here is C. And one thing I do want to point out here is that many people might be tempted to take a look at this x over 12 and think that that changes something here, but it doesn't. Okay, you are ultimately decreasing each year still by that 0.36, right? Since we have this growth rate of 0.64, which means we are decreasing by 36% every year. Here's something you need to know about medians and ranges for the SAT. Question 24 states the dot plot represents 15 values in dataset A. Dataset B is created by adding 56 to each of the values in dataset A. Which of the following correctly compares the medians and ranges of datasets A and B? Well, we know that if we add 56 to each of the values in dataset A, we ultimately are just going to change these values, but we're not actually going to change the range, or in other words, the distance from the minimum to the maximum. We are just going to change what value the minimum is and what value the maximum is, but not what the range is or the difference between the two. So our range will stay the same. So we can go ahead and write that range is going to stay the same. I'll just represent that as range is equal. Now, the next thing we need to take a look at is the medians. Well, obviously, if we're adding 56 to each of these values, they will ultimately change. For example, 22 plus 56 would then become 78, and then we'd have 79. And then right here, we would have 80, 81, and 82. So ultimately, obviously, our median then is going to increase significantly. Okay, so our median will increase, but our range will stay the same. Okay, so option A, we have the median of data set B is equal to the median. We know that's not true. Option B, we have the median of data set B is equal. We know that's not true. Option C, the median of data set B is greater than the median of data set A. We know that's true. And the range of data set B is equal to the range of data set A. We know that is true. So our answer is C. Here's why you need to know the equation for a circle on the SAT. Question 25 states the equation x squared plus y minus 1 squared equals 49 represents circle A. Circle B is obtained by shifting circle A down 2 units in the xy plane. Which of the following equations represents circle B? So first, I want to show you what the circle equation is. The circle equation would be something like the circle equation is this: x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared, where r is your radius, k is the center y value, and h is the center x value. So in this case, your center would be hk. All right, now that I've shown you the circle equation, let's go ahead and talk about how you can quickly answer this as long as you know the circle equation. Well, all you're doing here is you're just shifting circle A down by 2 units. So you're not affecting the x value of the center, and you're not affecting the radius. So those need to stay the same. And just on that, you can get rid of A and you can get rid of C. Now, as you can see, the next difference is going to be obviously the k value. Now, you have to understand that if you're shifting the circle down by 2 units, you need to know that that minus k means your center is at k. So if you need your center to move down, then you have to ultimately add 2, okay? Because if you want to move that center down 2 units, you have to add 2 because there's that minus sign in front of k. All right, so then what you do is you take this minus 1, you add 2, and you get y plus 1, so your answer there has to be answer choice D. Here's how to solve this very difficult SAT math question about surface area. Question 26 states that 2 identical rectangular prisms each have a height of 90 centimeters. The base of each prism is a square, and the surface area of each prism is k centimeters squared. If the prisms are glued together along a square base, the resulting prism has a surface area of 92 over 47 k centimeters squared. What is the side length in centimeters of each square base? All right, well, we know that the surface area of each prism, and keep in mind it says they are identical rectangular prisms, we know the surface area of each is going to be k centimeters squared. So we know the total surface area, if they were kept separate, would be 2k centimeters squared. Okay, we also know that when they are glued together then, the total surface area of everything then becomes 92 over 47k, which is obviously less than 2k, right? So the difference there is what we want to find. So it'd be 2k minus 92 over 47k. Now, we know that that's ultimately going to equal 2 times the area of each of those squares. So that would be 2 times s squared, where s is going to represent our side length of the square, which is what we want to solve for here. All right, so let's go ahead and get a value for k here, because we're going to need a value of k to then plug into another equation. So as far as what that other equation would be, let's go ahead and find what that is. So we know that we have a height of 90 centimeters on the rectangular prisms, and we know that the side length is going to be s. We'll represent that as s. So we then know that the surface area for the individual rectangular prism will then be represented as 90, which is the height, times our side length, which we're going to represent as s. So in other words, we can write that as 90s times 4, since we have 4 of those side lengths for each part of that rectangle. Okay, so 4 times 90s, and then we would have that much plus 2s squared. okay, because we also have to account for the square on the top and the bottom of the rectangular prism, and that's all going to equal k. All right, so if we can find the value of k, then we can substitute in. So let's go ahead and do that. 2k minus 92 over 47k will leave us with 2 over 47k. And then from there, we need to solve for k, so we'll multiply both sides by 47 over 2. Now, once we do that, we'll obviously end up with k then is going to equal, we'll have these two cancel out, so we'll have 47s squared. Okay, so let's write that neatly. K is equal to 47s squared. All right, now let's go ahead and substitute in for k. So we have 47s squared. Now I'm going to scroll down so that we can continue writing out this question. So from here, 4 times 90s will give us 360s. We have this plus 2s squared and we have this 47s squared. What I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to start moving everything over to this right side so we can get set equal to 0. Now the reason that I want to move everything over to the right side is so that I have a positive coefficient in front of s squared, just because that generally makes questions easier. So let's go ahead and do that by subtracting 2s squared from both sides and subtracting 360s from both sides. Once we've done that, we see that 0 is going to equal 45s squared minus 360s. From here, we can factor out 5s from both that 45s squared and that negative 360s. So once we do that, we'll have 0 is equal to 5s times 9s minus, it looks like that's going to be 360 divided by 5 will give us 72. So from here, we'll go ahead and set this equal to 0 again. So now we're going to have 0 is equal to 9s minus 72. From here, we'd add 72 to both sides. Once we do that, we're going to have 72 is equal to 9s. We divide both sides by 9. 72 over 9 is going to leave us with 8. And we see that 8 will be our value for s, which we see is going to be answer choice B. So B would be our correct answer here for question number 26. Here's how to answer this difficult SAT math question about percentages. The question states 210 is p% greater than 30. What is the value of p? Well, we know that we start with the value of 30. Then we want to multiply by 1, because if we don't increase at all, we still need to multiply by 1, plus the percent that we are going to increase by. So that would be p over 100. Now, we know that we ultimately need to equal that to 110. From here, we distribute our 30, which is our initial value, to 1 plus however much greater we are increasing, whatever that percentage is. So that will give us 30 plus 30 over 100, which can be represented as 0.3 times p. That's all going to equal 210. From here, we subtract 30 from both sides, and we're going to get that 0.3p is equal to 180. From there, we'll divide both sides by 0.3. 180 divided by 0.3 is going to leave us with 600 for the value of p. So the value of p is going to be 600. Now, one thing that you really need to pay attention to here is the wording. Okay, the wording is that it is p% greater than 30. That's really important, because you don't know if sometimes they'll say, hey, p is it's p% greater than 30. Sometimes they'll say it's p% of 30. Sometimes they will say it's p% less than 30. So always pay close attention to the wording with percentages questions, because if you don't pay attention to the wording of percentages questions, you're going to get it wrong. It's really, really important. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and consider sending a super thanks to help support my channel. Additionally, please drop a comment below letting me know what videos you want me to make in the future. And if you are looking for additional educational services that I offer, please check out my website, haydenrhodea.com.